Ça va?
Working? Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jacquelyn Melinek. I'm a senior crypto reporter at Techcrunch, and I am here today with Pascal. He's the CEO of Ledger. If you don't know him, everyone say hello. And then, and then we have Evin and Dan as well. So, yeah. But
I'm jealous.
This is your event. You didn't even
Yeah, like this is my house, okay?
get people. Yeah.
We'll give you extra cheers later. Yeah.
Pascal Gauthier, CEO at Ledger. Come on. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're just going to have like a fun conversation today. Obviously, you know the title of the panel, but I guess to start, you all have different backgrounds, and I want to just get your idea and perspective on like what does freedom really mean to you when it comes to crypto?
I guess I'll start. I was studying finance in undergrad during the 2008 financial crisis. And then I realized my books were wrong, the professors were wrong, and everyone on TV was wrong. And that made me start to question who had control over the economy and how was our economy managed. A couple of years later, I find out about Bitcoin. And so for me, Bitcoin replaces that trust that we have with institutions and instead gives us a world where we don't have to trust them and we have control ourselves. We don't have to trust them with the monetary policy or the money supply, which right now we're all feeling with inflation. Everything's getting much more expensive. We don't have to trust them holding our assets, so we don't have to worry about a bank run like Celsius. And so that's where self-custody is such a critical component of this world, where if you want to control your assets, you have to manage them yourselves. You have to self-custody them. So for me, freedom means, and Bitcoin means freedom from a coercive, centralized entity controlling my money.
So in Web3, we often talk about, financial ownership as the crux of freedom, as the crux of the kinds of autonomy we can express in this space. But ownership is a lot more than money. You are more than the contents of your wallet, as the movie Fight Club reminds us. And so for all of the rest of the data and all of the rest of the capabilities and accomplishments that make you you, we can't enjoy that same kind of freedom and control that we have over our money. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of a project called Disco. We are your identity for the metaverse, and we believe that the metaverse is your ability to show up in any digital or physical environment and receive a personalized experience as a result of the parts of yourself that you choose to share. So what this means is that you need to own a lot more than your money to be able to show up the way that you would like. You need to be able to own your friendships, your contacts, your experiences, the clubs you're part of, your coffee order, the places you like to hang out. And right now you own none of that. And so for me in Web3, control means self-ownership in a non-financial environment as well as in a financial one. The ability to decide what parts of yourself surface and what parts of yourself you share in what context, instead of Mark Zuckerberg making those decisions for you.
Yeah, so I think technology in general has a big impact on our lives, and technology is a way to normally become free. You're free to work, you're free to travel, you're free to meet, you're free to do all these things. And technology is supposed to enhance all of this. Because you can take a plane, suddenly you can come to New York and visit your American friends, etc. This is freedom. The problem with Web 1, Web 2 is like quickly technology became a trap. And so from Web 1 that gave you access to free internet, Web 2 was really the trap set by Apple to say, okay, well now you got your iPhone and now I control your life. And actually there have been many talks and many people complaining about this, where technology suddenly gets you to do something that you wouldn't do naturally, but that it traps you into a system. And even worse, like Web 2 was, it's always for the greater good, but it's like, because the service is free and because you become the product in the end, like, okay, you give up. And so freedom recently has been challenged by technology, but also by people, because people give up freedom for convenience. And so it's not just Apple, it's also us. And so Web3 is actually a way to change that, because you've been depossessed of everything with Web 2. Like, you don't own anything. Your digital life is a life of no ownership, and and no ownership means no freedom. Your physical life, you still own stuff, but Web 2 you didn't. And now you can change that. But something that we pitched today with Ledger, then it comes with education, because you need to forget everything you know, because like the world that we live in today, Web 2 is not really for us. This is not the future. Web 3 is probably more the future because you can become human again. And so this idea of the metaverse, ownership, etc., is like finally you can have a digital self that is you and that you control. And your digital self is your avatar to your physical self, and then that feels much more human and natural, because once you're you, then I can connect with someone else, we can build communities, etc. And this is what we see with Web3, this is what we see with NFT. It's actually something profoundly human, of like people connecting together on the stuff that they love, and individual to individual, peer to peer. So I think this is a wake-up call for freedom, and we should all pay attention because our freedoms are being heavily challenged today.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, all of you, for that. But Evin, I know you said we're more than our wallets, but this is a crypto event, so I'm going to get into like the financial aspect of freedom. And how do you guys think that differentiates from like what we experience in our Western society compared to those who don't have the same like banking systems or structures that we do? Like, why does this really matter?
That is an outstanding thing to call out, right? There is disparity in our freedom to transact across communities. So in the United States, the freedom to transact is perhaps, arguably the most fundamental of all other freedoms that we have. If we don't have the freedom to transact, we cannot gather to celebrate our religion. We can't buy posters to go to a protest and say that God hates NFTs. We cannot move from one space to another and present ourselves how we want if we do not have the ability to engage in the economy that drives the container for our narrative. And so in Web3, the foundation of ownership and freedom is the private keys that allow us an uninhibited freedom to transact. Now, of course, those are often gated by KYC, the requirement that you need to fund your wallet, connect to a bank account. And so the foundational elements required to onboard into this freedom to transact are not evenly distributed throughout the globe, which is why more interesting onboarding into self-custody, working in DAOs, creating value outside of a more traditional financial system that demands those rails is another route to freedom that looks a little different than how we might pursue it here in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like in the United States, Bitcoin and other crypto assets are usually held as like an inflation hedge or a gold 2.0. And some of the other crypto assets more mimic like crypto equity in a way. They represent ownership or like a governance token. Countries like a lot of South American countries or African countries, like they have different needs for Bitcoin, which are more maybe like payment related, like a payment rail, where they don't have access to a bank account, so this is their way to transmit value across borders, either via remittance or to buy something. Whereas here, I don't think we have that pain point because we can easily use credit cards pretty much anywhere. Our pain point is more of having some place to store our wealth that can't be seized and can't be manipulated. So yeah, it definitely changes depending on the context, I think, quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, a few fun facts about Ledger. First, we ship products everywhere in the world. To USA is only 35% of our business. And three, it's not about Ledger, but if you think about the Web3 landscape, some of the biggest companies are completely outside of the US. And so if you compare this to Web 1 and Web 2 trends, this is the first time it happens. Web 1, Web 2 is like US dominated, 100% the game. And then after it was the rest of the world, like Europe typically never was good at Web 1 or Web 2. Web 3 is very different. Companies are popping up everywhere in the world. The biggest trading platform is Binance. The biggest, everything, if you think about it, most of the things are actually outside of the US. And it's not like a bad competition.
This is good though. I mean, a lot of people, the crypto revolution isn't just a US thing.
Correct.
It's a global thing.
Yeah, it's a global thing. And so I think this is probably the first time that we see this in tech. You got a global phenomenon. It's fun. It's a fun fact. Again, we did a small series of a product, and I checked the first order, and it was Azerbaijan. Like how random for an e-commerce business that your first order will come from a country of Central Asia. And so what we see at Ledger, which is why also for us the product roadmap is quite difficult, is because no one is using crypto exactly the same way. And so the difficulty of building an open security platform is that you need to cater for all the communities everywhere in the world doing different things. We did a cool, Ariel, our VP marketing, did something very cool about Lebanon, and how Lebanon economy is broken, their fiat currency is obviously completely broken, and how they move everything towards crypto. So that's one use case. Zimbabwe is probably a similar use case. What we have in France is completely different. Like, people don't really understand. But if you go and visit Argentina, Zimbabwe, Lebanon, like, they do get it, like, and they do fundamentally get it. And actually, the people in France that don't get it are usually the people that are in power and controlling things that don't want to lose that power. If you go to a party and people usually say, I don't understand crypto, and I say, okay, well, tell me what you understand, and usually they say the right things. Financial freedom, I can own my stuff, I don't trust my bank, I don't actually really trust my government. So people are getting it fundamentally, and this is why I think ultimately it's a success. Like, sometimes people are like, oh, this is never going to work, but it's so primal, it's so fundamental, and it's so human across the board that this wins. Like, it will never go away because it's part of our DNA, I think.
I just want to take a little shift from that and move towards the situation with Celsius. I know you all have some thoughts on that. And why is it so important, going off of what you said, Pascal, to self-custody and have these private keys managed in a situation where you can't always have that, especially when things freeze? So
I'll start this one. So for those who don't know, Celsius is a lending and borrowing platform. You can earn a yield with your Bitcoin by lending your Bitcoin to them. Well, what happened was an old-fashioned bank run. They had lent out all these coins, and then everyone came and said, hey, I don't want my coins back, and they couldn't bring all the coins in time, so they had to freeze withdrawals. Now, there are some other ideas that they might have a big loss too, or something like that, but we don't know. But they have a classic mismatch problem. And so basically, this is like the crypto version of like Lehman Brothers or something like that, where everyone's freaking out about like, oh, is Celsius the only one? So Celsius is this big platform that went down. Lots of people are freaked out. And it's in these moments when you realize you need self-custody. Otherwise, you're trusting that Celsius is doing things with your coins, versus if you self-custody, you singularly control your coins. So yeah, Celsius was a huge blow up, and I think definitely woke up a lot of people to the reality of like self-custody is important.
I think Celsius invites us yet another opportunity to contemplate the difference between trust-minimized environments and crypto-related environments. Just because you are engaging with crypto does not mean that you are in a trust-minimized interaction. And I think especially for newcomers to this space who don't recognize that you can have one without the other, this is obviously a shocking moment while we're watching under-collateralized stablecoins depeg in real time. And so I think as a community, we have a responsibility to differentiate language around self-custody, especially when it comes to friendly products that have cute design and Forbes 30 under 30 leadership and appeal to a younger generation.
So I agree with everything. I violently agree with everything that was just said, but I'm gonna be mean. Like, I'm gonna say, like, this is not Lehman Brothers, because to your point, like the language that was used by Celsius was the wrong language, and you can actually argue that it was quite deceitful. And Kraken, typically being a good player in the space, like use like complete different language. Like when you go on Kraken, they say, don't leave your coins on the exchange. It's actually the first thing that you see. Don't leave the coins on the exchange. Put it on a hardware wallet, etc. So Kraken, being the good student in the room, did the language and everything, didn't try to cheat users into having the perception that Kraken is your financial freedom, blah 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 blah. No, Kraken is an exchange, and once you're done with the transaction, move your coins away. Celsius has a different approach, and if you look at the language, to your point, that they use on the website, etc. Okay, this is some kind of Theranos type of bullshit, and no, but honestly. It's like, oh, this is, give me your blood. Oh, you got cancer. Oh, sorry, no. But so here you're like, oh, give me your coins and I give you financial freedom and fuck the banks, etc. This is actually what they said when they were themselves a bank. And the question is like, do I trust these guys or Goldman Sachs better? I mean, I trust Goldman Sachs better than Celsius.
What's hilarious is that Alex Mashinsky, the CEO of Celsius, was shitting on self-custody as of like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah, or like
so
right before it. So it's very poetic.
Honestly, no, but I mean, and for me, like the reason we're a little annoyed is because for the past 4 years I've been battling to explain what self-custody is, And because some of the players are mixing and matching the words, and they're like, oh, but in the end, like, why would I use a hardware wallet? Because I can all put on Celsius, and then I do it 4%, and I got also financial freedom and all these good keywords. I'm like, yes, but it's not the same. And honestly, for most people that don't do the work of education, it's hard. Like, they don't spend 5 minutes to understand what Celsius really means and what Ledger really means, et cetera, et cetera. And it's okay, the industry is young, etc., and this is bound to happen. So this is why we're doubling down on education. It's something that we presented earlier, because people need to re-educate themselves to the point of switching Web 2 to Web 3. This is not going to be an easy switch. It's a bit of the blue pill, red pill from the Matrix, and some people don't want to take the red pill. I think the red pill to go with the resistance, okay. Some people want to take the blue pill because they're happy in the Matrix. It's fine. Voilà. So now we need to distill those red pills.
An uninvited content shill for a quick second. My absolute favorite video series for all those new to Web3, inviting their friends into Web3, is the School of Block series from Ledger. I share it with everyone. We love it at Boys Club. So if you or your friends are curious about learning about these ideas, definitely want to encourage you to check those out.
Check it out. All right. Going off of that, self-custodying is all about like having it to yourself and really like making sure that it's in your own wallet, as we've kind of discussed here. But the idea of decentralization is such a fundamental thing to crypto. And I feel like a lot of times it's being tested, whether it be with regulators, both in the US and globally, because there's more than the US. And I'm curious, how do we continue to hold decentralization at the heart of crypto when so many people are entering the space and so many regulators are looking at it more and more?
I actually kind of want to challenge that question a little bit. I don't think we need to hold decentralization in the center of our design principles. I think we need to hold human beings. So right now we are building human coordination tools, but so often we miss the human part. What is the outcome for human beings that we are trying to get to, where decentralization is a tool or set of design principles that can help us achieve that outcome? So at Disco, our thought is that, minimum viable decentralization where appropriate, when we're optimizing for our users' needs, that is sort of how we achieve a technical outcome that's going to make sense, that we can defend with regulators, that we can explain to our peers. But philosophically, decentralization is a really hard concept because it requires you to understand centralization and see a problem. So again, I think, to Pascal's point, it is a question of education. If we don't know what the word decentralization means, if we don't understand what the tool does, what kind of tricks you can do with it, then we cannot leverage it for the betterment of all of us coordinating together.
Yeah, I think decentralization is on this sliding scale. It's not a binary thing. It's not like decentralized or not decentralized. The forces, the centralizing forces are always there and are always present to continually centralized, because it's easier in a coordination type function to make things centralized. So there's this constant tug and pull with protocols on trying to stay decentralized without inserting different centralized aspects. For example, all of these protocols are code, but how do updates occur? Well, there's a social aspect of the community where they all agree upon changes. And the way that Bitcoin approaches that versus other communities is very different. And this is like crypto politics in a way. And that matters, though. It matters how updates are done, because if a group of people in a closed room just roll out an update to a protocol and everyone just agrees, then how's it any different than a centralized solution? So yeah, it's a very complex topic. I don't want to go into all the nuances of it, but it's definitely on this gradient where I like the term minimum viable decentralization. I don't know if you need like Bitcoin's nuclear grade decentralization for NFTs, maybe. Like you might, but I think there's definitely some like sacrifice of, cool, I want to do these fun things and I want to have like an open permissionless system, which I think a lot of people refer to blockchain as more just like open and permissionless, but not like nuclear grade decentralized, to where most use cases probably don't need a nuclear grade ledger, but the use case of money does. And that's why the Bitcoin community protects that so hard. But yeah, I do agree with like that minimum viable decentralization makes sense for some use cases.
Yeah, so to me, it comes back to the principle of freedom, and you talk about like decentralization versus regulation. So first, I figured that code is freedom of speech. It's actually protected by one of your amendments in the US. Code is freedom of speech. And once I found that out, I was like, okay, we're good. Like, if it's freedom of speech, then we're good. And then it's hard to regulate mathematics. Okay, regulation usually is done for centralized value propositions that are opaque. Like, so you don't know what's going on. So you say, the regulation is for the outcome. It's like, I don't know what you're doing, but the outcome needs to be ABC. And if the outcome is not ABC, then I'm gonna come and have a look, and then you'll be fined. But if it's open, if it's pure mathematics, there is nothing to regulate, which is why Bitcoin is an unregulated value proposition, and no one will be able to regulate Bitcoin. And so what I think it means for businesses like ours and for businesses in general, or when you want to build on this decentralized system, is you need to be as selfless as possible. Like, the Apple model is not possible in a decentralized world. This is why Web2 companies will have a hard time switching to Web3, or it's impossible. I mean, think about Facebook, then as they call Meta. I mean, it's a bit of a joke. Like, when they took Libra to market, and I met with the Libra team, and they pitched me their ideas, I was like, okay, so maybe I don't understand anything, but this sounds like it's not going to work. Because they wanted decentralization, but it was not really, but they wanted to own something. Like, they wanted to capture users. They only did this to capture more users into their ecosystem, which is the wrong approach. It's not very selfless. It's like to the benefit of Facebook. And then boom, they do it again with Meta and whatever they call the metaverse, which is weird. I mean, it's weird. And actually
it's like seeing your uncle do the Macarena at like a wedding. Like, it's like really awkward to watch. It's
No,
like
but
kind of
honestly,
cringe. It's cringe.
And I looked at Zuckerberg presenting Meta, and we put his mask, and he's like, "Oh, I'm in a meeting." I'm like, "Dude, you're just weird. Like, that's so not the metaverse. Like, that's nonsense."
The future of the metaverse is not hanging out inside of someone else's website with an iPad strapped to your face.
No, it is not. And anyways, so I think when you go Web3, like, you have to be selfless, and typically you have to build technologies to be completely resilient, and technologies in a sense that if you fail, the technology survives. And so typically at Ledger, this is how we try to build things. If Ledger goes under tomorrow, it's okay. You are safe. Number one, your Ledger will keep on working. You can connect your Ledger to something else. You can retrieve your funds, etc. Like, you don't need Ledger in your life. If you like the products, you should use them. But know that if we go under, because I'm a bad manager and I don't know how to manage cash in the company, it doesn't really matter. We build everything so you guys are safe, and we are disaster resilient. Even if my office burns or people drop a bomb, it doesn't matter. We are disaster resilient, and all companies should build themselves to be disaster resilient, so they provide a service to the user that survives even if the company goes under. And so this is what I think decentralization means, and this is how businesses, but it's hard. It's a very hard thing to do, because to be fully decentralized and to be as light as possible, it's very, very hard.
And my last question for you three before we go to Q&A, so if you guys have questions, you could ask them as well. What are your current thoughts on the current market, and how long will it last? I know in the past, Dan, you said that this crypto winter will be shorter or less harsh than others. I'm curious if you still hold that thought, and then everyone else's thoughts.
I might have been off on that. It's a pretty intense winter. Look, I've been hodling since about 2012, 2011. Actually, I set up my Mt. Gox account in 2011, I found. So I thought I was a 2012 era, but actually 2011. So every crypto winter mimics human behavior. So you have fear, and then you have greed. And this is a classic cycle that I've seen happen over 10 years, 3 times. We're in the fearful part. You're probably looking at your account, and you're like, fuck, that hurts. Like, a lot of red all across the board. That's a feeling that we all have, even old hodlers like myself. Now, trading on that versus, looking at your investment thesis, why did I buy this? Is it worth it long term? Is how you should approach it, instead of letting an emotion come into your heart and then you go panic sell. So for me, Bitcoin, the reason why I invested in Bitcoin is that it's I think a world reserve currency eventually, and it'll be like a gold 2.0. And if it is successful at that, it will be worth trillions of dollars in market cap. And we're pretty far away from that. So, and I think my thesis is proving more and more right over the last 10 years, where we have huge institutions saying, hey, Bitcoin is gold 2.0. So yeah, while the price may not reflect that now, That's why you're investing in something, whether that be Bitcoin or equity or something else, is you believe that someday in the future, more people will find it valuable or it will go execute and do well. So the crypto winter is as harsh as the other ones, so I was wrong on that. I thought it might be softened a little bit.
I'll update the story.
Oh, thanks. Dan held changes. It's going to be cold. It's going to be cold. But no, I'm still as bullish as ever on Bitcoin. But yeah, the price reflects aggregate kind of fear, and Celsius, I think, kick-started that a little bit, where people started to panic and they wondered if there was contagion. So yeah, I'm still hodling, and been hodling 10 years. So I'm very, very bullish on Bitcoin. Very, very excited for the ecosystem. So yeah, I think we're going to see a couple-year winter, and then have a kind of a classic cycle. But we've got tens of billions of dollars invested in this space from VCs. I mean, the community is massive now. I mean, this is crazy. Like the Bitcoin conferences back in 2013 literally had as many people as in this room. Like, they were tiny. So there's a lot of smart people building, a lot of money. So I think it's going to be a very productive. I like the winters too, because you can go build. It's less distracting. So I think it's the time to build, and I'm still very bullish.
So it might be chilly out there on the chain. We are clutching onto our cold storage, preparing for this winter, but off the chain, it is balmy and it is fun season. So if the only thing I know about you is, let's say, your Ethereum address, the only thing we can be is a group chat with a bank account. We can spend money together. But if I know more about you, if we get into utility, if I can build up my reputation, I can build up my friendships, my proofs of non-financial work, then we're talking. So now that we are no longer looking at green candles to keep us occupied, we have an opportunity to explore what other kinds of fun we can have. What other kinds of coordination games can we solve together that are not just based on token prices, but are based on our activities as human beings. And so I'm super excited for this build and buy market, because identity is popping off and we are ready for human experiences beyond throwing money at each other.
Yeah. All right, so first, this doesn't feel like a bear market. I mean, look at you, look at outside, etc. I mean, this is, if that's a bear market, okay. Previous bear markets, I think it was only Bitcoin. Like, you know, the market was doing fine. Now, for the macro economy, it's a bloodbath. Klarna, who's one of the biggest business in Europe, is doing a new round at 15 billion versus 45, which was the last valuation. If you look at the Nasdaq, it's down 28%. If you look at unprofitable companies at the Nasdaq, they're down 64%. So there is a macro trend that is just impacting everything at a global scale, everywhere. Bon, okay. And so actually, I'm thinking that if you look at, if you take 2020 as an anchor, I was discussing with Pompliano this the other day, and he made the point, like, if you look at 2020 as an anchor, I mean, you know, Bitcoin and crypto assets outperform everything. Like, if you had invested money in Bitcoin and crypto assets in 2020, you still outperform anything that is out there. So actually, the market is resisting pretty well. And the market has been impacted by macro events and also, you know, our own greed. UST, Luna, Terra, etc. I mean, it's just greedy. It's like 20%. Like, when it's too good to be true, it's just too good to be true. Like, it's probably false, you know. And so, if you get the macroeconomics and what has happened into crypto itself, with like the number of theft and people not taking care of their private keys, etc. I mean, look at everything that is on Bitcoin and crypto right now, and look how it's still pretty good. Like, you know, it's still happening. So, I think. So that's, you know, from a high view. And now let me give you stats about Ledger. Like, you know, the last crypto winter, our sales went down 90%. We're doing 10 million months, and then we went to 1. I can tell you, the CEO of a company, you're like, oh my God, are we going to do this? And thank God we had raised a bunch of cash before, and it was like, you know, and sometimes when you raise cash, people are like, why do you raise so much cash? I'm like, I don't know, but, and so when this happened, you're like, oh, this is why. Like, you know, I raised the cash because, you know, this is exactly why. And so last time we raised cash was Series C, and thank God we raised a lot of cash. And people were like, why do you raise so much cash? I don't know. And so now I know. Except that this time around, the revenue is not slowing down for Ledger. You know, first, you know, thanks to our good friend at Celsius, everybody understand now that, you know, to be self-sovereign and to have a ledger is actually the way to go. So, you know, I'll never thank them enough. And so if you look at our sales, every quarter, we do as much revenue as 2020. And 2020 was a good year for us. It was, it was a nice year where everything was ramping up, and we're still up. We're growing by 2 digits still year on year. Q1, Q2 this year compared to Q1, Q2 last year. So actually, the market is holding pretty well, and actually, and I think it pushes the market to where it needs to be. If you take Ledger outside of the picture, DeFi is not doing too bad actually. DeFi has held pretty well in this market, etc. And so, and NFT is doing amazing. And so, what it shows is the value proposition that work are actually the value proposition that are supposed to work. It's decentralized, it's self-sovereign, it's DeFi, it's NFT, it's everything that is good, for human beings, to your point. That's what works. What doesn't work is what was not supposed to work, to start with. Centralized value propositions and or centralized value proposition without the best ethics. Kraken still works, and they're still doing amazingly fine, and they're recruiting people. Why? Because they've been the best player in the space from the beginning. And if you listen to Dan and to Jesse, everything they've been saying from the beginning is legit. And so there is no question why they're successful still today.
And I think, Pascal, too, like you've been in the space a long time, and Jesse has as well. I work at Kraken, by the way. That's why he keeps bringing it up. So Jesse and you, I think, have that mindset of long-term building. How do I build a company that's going to last decades? And I think we've seen a lot of companies raise a bunch of money, then hit their first bear market and just kind of fizzle out because they didn't plan long term. Kraken's been around since 2012. It's been around a very long time. So I think with businesses like these, to survive the bear market cycle, you have to have that forward thinking of having a good amount of cash, not overhiring, Coinbase, not overhiring, and just slow and steady wins the race versus I think there's this pressure in a bull run just to go deploy a ton of capital right away. And Jesse's very principled about that, and I think Kraken's grown at a very fast pace, but not like an overly aggressive pace.
Cool. All right, so we only have a couple minutes left, so we'll probably just take one question. That's our one question. Go for it.
So not my coins. Not my keys, not my coins.
Not my keys, not my coins. Solves that piece around trustless. But the trustless piece around the complex systems. So on Terra, on one level there are examples of these things are so complex that 99% of people that are putting their money into USD probably don't understand the underlying dynamics. Same with Om. So use a meme like 3-3, like we're all good now. How do you deal with that, the trustlessness around the underlying complexity and that without regulators coming in again and going, we have to take over again, this is too complex for you guys to get your head around?
I would invite us to contemplate that language, trustless. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us to think about trust minimized, edge trust, pushing trust toward those who are deploying, those who are creating the environment in which we believe we are trustlessly interacting. So whether it's an under-collateralized stablecoin or yet another Ohm fork Ponzi, I think the language that we use to present these ideas can be misleading when we forget that there's human intervention that makes these things possible, and it is in those moments of weakness with human intervention where these things fail. So fundamentally, I think this is a language and education problem with how we are presenting these ideas, because we use these top-level words and then we assume consequences around them where we feel greater safety than we actually have.
So there's a lot to cover here. I'm going to try my best in like 1 minute. So John Oliver puts it really eloquently. So John Oliver is a British comedian. He says, crypto is everything you don't understand about money with everything you don't understand about computers. Or at least that's how it feels, right? It's like, and then they throw around terms like trustless, and we've got all these terminologies for how these chains work, and a lot of it's jargon, like super jargon filled. And look, almost no one knows how all this shit works, right? Like there's experts in individual coins, and for me, for example, like I've delved really deep into Bitcoin. I think ultimately you do have to have some level of trust. So the word trustless is really misleading. It's more of trust minimized. For example, I'm not a software engineer. I can't go parse through Bitcoin's code. It's open source, so I assume that other very smart people have gone through it and looked for flaws. But Yeah, you do have to have some measure of trust with these things, and that's where, I think education is key here. Education and a lot of the projects too, I think, use misleading marketing, which I personally find distasteful, where they market a product like very safe or guaranteed yield or something like that. When you pull over the cover and you're like, wait a second, all you're really doing here is you're just like building a Ponzi scheme. So I think education is key, because when people are educated, then they go and look and objectively try to evaluate these other protocols without just, otherwise they just buy it because their buddy told them about it.
One other quick thing. When we talk about trust, really what this is an issue of identity and reputation. Whether it's the identity and reputation of a smart contract in determining which version was audited, whether it's the identity and reputation of a person shelling these tokens and inviting people to join their community. So without account abstraction, without the ability to understand who is behind an asset, what entity is responsible for ensuring that your front-end code or your smart contracts are sound, without the ability to engage that information in a trust minimized or edge trust way, we are just relying on how robust the website looks.
Okay, me, I would say that greed is a capital sin. So if it feels greedy, probably you shouldn't do it. And actually, when I got into Bitcoin, I met a guy called Vences Cesares, who's the CEO at Zappo, who's like the Bitcoin OG, who got like a bunch of us in the market. And he said to me, invest like 2%, 3% max of your money. Treat this as a proof of concept. We don't know. Might be good, but we don't know. And go slow, etc. And don't be greedy, and let's do this to build something, and we're not just in for the money. And for me, crypto has never been about making money. It was always about building something greater that would help humanity. Before, I was in advertising. My business was advertising, and I was selling clicks to e-commerce websites. And so it didn't really feel like curing cancer. We built a great company. We listed in the Nasdaq. It was $2 to $3 billion valuation, etc. It was a fantastic. The adventure was fantastic more because of the humans that I worked with, or the team that we built, rather than the product that we were delivering. I mean, it was cool, but it was not like it's advertising. And so when I got into Bitcoin, for me, I was like, okay, now how do we solve big problems? Financial inclusion, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know I was going to solve this, and I still don't know actually, but it was interesting, and it was about freedom, and it was all these things. And making money was never it, which is why I bought some coins, but never to spend them, to hold them probably forever actually, because I don't need the money. I don't spend much money, to be honest. I don't live a frugal life. I live a happy life, and I spend some money, but I don't spend that much money. And so everything that I'm doing is not so much to make money, it's to do great things. And I think, when you engage in crypto, if you follow that first principle, engage in crypto to do great things and not be greedy, etc. Now, if you're a trader, that's different, and then you take risk, and sometimes you take risks, you get wrecked, and c'est la vie of un trader. Traders do trading, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So that's a different story. But if you're this is NFT, and so I hope that when you engage into an NFT community, it's not just to gamble on the next artist, it's just to sort of engage and that human feeling of engaging with people, etc. So don't be greedy, I think, is the one principle to follow. Behave ethically, try to build communities, try to do something greater than yourself. And if you follow those principles, you stay away from 20% APY and that type of bullshit. I never did that. I looked at it and I was like, fuck that. That's never going to work. And it didn't. So there you go.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Pascal, Evin, and Dan, for taking the time to talk to everyone today. And thank you, everyone, for listening in.
Hi, my name is Sah Haddad.
Hi, my name is Katie Rago.
Danny Laviaga.
Johnny.
Danielle.
My name is Matthew Soares. I've been a Ledger user for probably about 8 months now.
I've been a Ledger user for about 8 months now.
2 months now.
3 months.
About a year and a half.
The last 2 months.
Since today.
I am in the Web 3.4 learning.
I'm honestly Web3 for the community, and I'm really trying to learn a lot more.
Investing, and also I have my own project, so building as well in the space.
I entered the space through crypto. I ended up finding NFT, and I just stayed.
I started with crypto, and now I'm kind of into the Web3 space, and now it's kind of like a mixture of both.
I kind of just buy ETH and let it sit there. With the NFTs, I'm more active.
A ledger, to me, makes me feel secure, makes me feel safe.
It means somebody's got my back.
It makes me feel safe and secure.
It means safety.
Safety.
Safety, security.
And also simplicity.
It makes me feel secure.
It makes me feel safe to know that I